I'm making copies so that changing one doesn't change the others. And each time I make a new clone, I have to remember to adjust the two keyframes. So I start it with the clone on 0, and I adjust the clone at 100. In this example, again, how you tweak this for your own needs might be different. I'm going to repeat that process for the rest of the control nulls. When I make the second adjustments, I'm not holding shift, by the way. That would make things interesting. So this one's not going to bunch up too close. So maybe I will bunch it up a little bit tighter here, because I want the curtain to go over to the left a little bit. Because I have AutoKey on, I can make this adjustment, and it'll record or remember that keyframe change. So it'll start off wide and pull close. If I want to reverse the effect, I can just reverse the keyframes for all the nulls. This would be a good time to save your work, or at least do a temporary save here via hold. And then the next step is to start assigning parts of the cloth to a specific null point. To do that, I need to select the curtain again, which reminds me I never named it. And we're going to start by adding the cloth simulation modifier. So selecting the cloth and or the curtain here, and in the modifier stack, I'm going to add a cloth layer. Now, before I assign the null points here, I'm going to turn off AutoKey, and I'm going to set up the initial parameters for the simulation. To do that, I need to go into Object Properties under the cloth modifier. Don't be afraid of the big menu full of lots of things to change. When you get this window up, there's going to be your curtain, or whatever you named your curtain, in the list at the left. That is going to be our cloth object. Anything else in the scene that you want to interact with the cloth needs to be added via the Add Objects button. For instance, I have a floor object here that I'm going to add in. So I hit Add Objects, and I'm going to include the plane for my floor. Okay. So now I have two types of objects that I need to assign. One is my actual cloth object, so I'll select that first. And on the right side at the top, there's a cloth toggle. And once it's toggled on, you have access to all the other parameters. The only parameter that I want to change is the preset, and I'm going to set mine to wool. A nice heavy, thick cloth. Okay, so next I'm going to select the ground object, and right now it's set to inactive. Instead of cloth, I'm going to select it to be a collision object. So if the curtain tends to dangle enough to hit the floor, it'll bunch up a little bit. So I'm just going to leave the settings the default. I did change the curtain preset to wool. You can leave it at the default setting to see how it reacts, and you might want to change the parameters to get the effect that you want. But I want a nice heavy wool type of cloth so that it feels like thick, heavy cloth. Maybe not exactly like wool, but from my experimentation, wool seems to work pretty good for this effect. Once I've set my cloth object to cloth and my collision object to collision, I'm hit OK. And I'm ready to now assign points of the cloth to the nulls and pick up some of that animation. So to do that, I need to open up the sub-object of the cloth modifier. So I'm going to click on the little plus mark next to cloth and select the group sub-object. Okay, with group selected in the cloth subobject menu, I'm going to zoom in to my anchor null. And I'm going to look for a point on my cloth or curtain here that should match up to that point. I believe you can use more than one point, but I'm just going to use just one single point. On the right side, in the modifier subobject group, I'm going to click on Make Group. And I can name it if I like, or just keep the group number 1 name or label and hit OK. Now on the right side, it will list in the window here, Group 1 Unassigned. So now I have the option of assigning this point to something else. And we do that via a node. So I'm going to use the node under the group rollout, and with the group 1 selected, click on the point that I want it to connect to. Now in the list it says group 1 node to point 1. Now I can rinse and repeat the process for each null and pick a point on the cloth that I want it to attach to. So I can use this point, 2 steps, make group, label, node, and then select the point. So again, select the point you want to use on your curtain, make it a group, and then make a node connection to the appropriate point object or null. And if I'm not mistaken, you can also use an object or a piece of geometry as a node as well. But you might have to experiment with that. So I'm going to rinse and repeat here. I'm going to give it a group, assign it a node, and move on to the next one. So now I have something to hold the cloth up so that it won't just drop onto the floor when I run my simulation. I should also note, if you want a specific material on your cloth, or you need some UVs for your material, you'll want to put your UV unwrap or your UV modifier underneath the cloth simulation so that the map is applied before the wrinkles occur. So if I were going to do that, I would select Garment Maker, accept this warning, and then add that UV map or UV unwrap. I'm not going to do that in this example though. I'm going to go back up to my cloth and just double check to make sure I have a group assigned for every node that I have. So if I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, I should have 7 groups, and I do. So once that's been established, I can go out of subobject mode and back into the regular cloth parameters. The first thing I'm going to do is run the simulation as is, just locally. So I'm going to run simulate local, and we can see here the curtain is dropped. We're getting little peaks and valleys at the top, and if the floor was a little bit closer, it would have hit the floor. So it's kind of done all it's going to do. It's not changing, but it's still running the simulation. You can see that value changing on the bottom left here. That means the simulation is still running and I need to stop it. So I just hit the button again and the simulation is now stopped. Okay? I can erase that simulation via this button here if I want to make any changes. Oops, I should... that's if I have an animated simulation. Right now it's not resetting this. To do that, I need to reset the state. Excuse me. There we go. Reset state puts it back to its pre-simulation state. Okay, the reason why I reset this in my example is I want to move the floor up just a little bit so you can see what happens when it bunches up a little bit. It has a nice effect. So I'm going to move the floor up a little bit, and now I'm going to reset the simulation by simulating local again. You can see here now the curtain is bunching up a little bit at the bottom. It's still peaking and valleying at the top as well. So once I see it stop moving, I'm going to turn the simulation off, and let's go back to a side view, we can see, whoops,